mean to you?
Well, sustainability, I guess, is making the communities you live in pretty much self-sufficient, or self-sufficient as you can. I mean, where we live, a lot of these rural areas, and especially the northern Great Plains and everything, it's we don't produce anything we consume. I mean, there are some, some people have gardens and some people produce animals and those kind of things, but the clothes we wear, the gas we use, the vehicles we drive, everything, none of it is. So basically we're like a third world country out here, and it's an extractive society in that everything that we consume is shipped in, everything we produce is shipped out. There's no manufacturing here, so we're kind of at the whim and will of whoever we're buying from. And over the last 50, 60 years, input prices have gone up. So the profit margin in most of these operations has become less and less. And a lot of times the only way they can survive is basically farming the government programs instead of actually producing food. I mean, they all want to work and they want things to do, but the only way to make it work sometimes is to get the subsidy that puts you kind of over the top, especially in years when everybody else around the world is producing wheat and you're producing wheat too. You just, the prices are so low that you can't sustain yourself over a short period of time. Over a long period of time, it kind of averages out. But producers now are getting basically paid the same $3.50 a bushel for wheat as they did in 1950.
Yeah.
And their input costs have gone way up.
Is ranching different, or is it basically very similar?
It's different. Ranching and farming are a lot different because now we're using a lot more chemicals, a lot more commercial fertilizers. And it used to be that all these operations were pretty much diversified, and I had cattle and sheep and pigs and chickens, and then I farmed too, and I took the manure and I put it out on the fields, and we went that way, and there was very little commercial fertilizer, and what was available was cheap. And now organic matter's down in most of our land out there, so a lot of times about the only way you can get a decent crop is to put fertilizer on it. And then a lot of monoculture, so we're spraying a lot for diseases and those kind of things. So moving back towards a more diversified operation, I think in a lot of cases would make operations more sustainable. I don't know that it would make them more profitable, but you could last a little longer. And the big push with the projects that we're working on is basically feeding ourselves and then hopefully producing enough to sell outside, but producing more food and less food ingredients, do a little more manufacturing here, which isn't calling for large scale factories and all that other stuff. It's just producing items that require minimal processing, don't require specialized handling, specialized storage, that kind of thing. We're in the bison nation here, so it's a lot of grassland, so a lot of red meat, and a lot of dry grains, lentils, peas, those kind of things, something that will store without refrigeration, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I've always had the idea, and I don't know how likely or how easy it would be to do this, but I've always had the concept, the idea that you could take small towns in America, which are dwindling, getting smaller and smaller because people are going to other places, to bigger cities, to different jobs like that. And there's so much you can do now with technology that it would make sense for people who want to have this quality of life, as far as it being more inexpensive to live, low crime rate,
Right.
no pollution or very little pollution, all this. It seems like you could attract a certain type of sort of technology worker and bring that in, because all you need is broadband, and then you have access to that. But I don't know if that's feasible.
Well, here, I mean, it is especially feasible here because we have rural telephone cooperatives, and basically we have better internet access in eastern Montana through. There's a co-op up north. It's Niemont, and here it's Mid Rivers, and you can get broadband access just about anywhere. So that's the. There was a guy that wrote a book back in the 50s called The Great Plains in Transition. It was Carl Kranzel, and the only thing that he couldn't predict was the advent of the internet and the computer. But basically, he said it's always going to be tough because it's an extractive society, and the number one economic and social cost in this part of the Great Plains is transportation. The producers are discounted when they ship their product out. It's manufactured someplace else, which is creating jobs someplace else. And since we don't, they ship it back in a consumable form, say in the wheat as flour or bread, then they pay the transportation costs coming back. So we're hoping to cut some of that stuff out.
So is there a big picture, kind of simplified version of what the solution would be?
In some of our minds, yeah. I mean, it'd be feeding ourselves first. I mean, figuring out what we're eating now. I mean, food is the first thing that you need to survive that you spend money on. I mean, air is pretty much free, water's pretty much free, but food you have to buy. And then the other one, when it's 40 below here, housing is probably more important than any of the other three. But getting to the point where
that's cold.
Yeah, that's cold.
I have to say, that's cold.
Well, and the people don't realize that this part of the northern Great Plains, I can have 150 degree temperature swing. It can be 110 above in the summer and 40 below in the winter. It's actually hard for a lot of plants to survive in that, which is why we're looking at annual crops instead of perennial crops like cherry trees. Apples grow well here, those kind of things, but they have a hard time making it through the winter and that kind of stuff. So we're looking at producing small grains, vegetables that are consumed pretty much fresh, and then just used by people without having to store it and that kind of stuff. Looking at seasonal menu, and that's where Garth, our program that we're working on, is trying to work with. The best food is probably fresh food, and it's seasonal, so it doesn't require processing, doesn't require a lot of storage. So how can we eat year-round without developing a huge infrastructure to store food, which actually allows it to degrade and it loses its nutrients before you eat it again. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of it's necessary, but the more we can eat fresh, the better off we're going to be.
Sure.